But please do remember that everybody is joining the event from their own homes, and that unavoidable technical issues may arise relating to the broadband connections or home IT setups. Tonight's briefing consists of a short presentation by Joe Baker, as GCP technical lead for the project, followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions. To ask a question, you'll be invited to raise your hand via the button in the attendee and chat pane. To open this pane, please click on the participants and chat buttons on the bottom menu on your Zoom screen. We only have an hour for this meeting, and we're aware that the Fen Ditton Parish Council has a Zoom meeting at 7:30, so we'll do our very best to keep to time. I'd now like to hand over to Joe.
Thanks, Peter. Sarah, can you bring the slides up, please? Thanks. We'll go over the first couple of which just housekeeping. Thanks. So I think quite a few of you will have been on the previous stakeholder webinars we did earlier in the summer, or responded to the pre-consultation engagement we also did at the same time. So hopefully people will be aware of the wider aims and objectives of the project, which is the Cambridge Eastern Access Project is one of 4 strategic corridors in and out of Cambridge, where GCP is looking at access to and from the city from the east to enable people to get around more easily by public transport, cycle, or on foot. We're looking to improve connectivity between existing settlements and to identify the best packages of measures to ensure connectivity is in place when future development comes on board. So there is an important distinction in the sorts of solutions we're looking at the moment. Some are very much about resolving existing problems. Others are looking at anticipating the pressures of future development and making sure that the city is in a better place for dealing with them. But in both cases, the underlying theme is trying to reduce propensity for trips to be made by car. And obviously, we're very aware that with the current COVID situation, there is a degree of uncertainty around that, what that means for the future. And that's something which we will be monitoring as we go forward. So next slide, please. I think you probably would have seen this image already. This gives you a summary of the study area. Just to be clear, this is the Newmarket Road coming in from the Choir Interchange, through Barnwall, past the Leper Chapel, and in as far as Elizabeth Way. At the same time, obviously Coldham's Lane is a potential parallel route that may in due course face pressures of development transport, and we're aware of concerns already about congestion along Coldham's Lane. In terms of growth in the area, 2 sites highlighted orange, the Marley development, which is underway, and the approved land north of Cherry Hinton, which will be proceeding. But people will also be aware that whilst at the moment it's not in the local plan as committed development, much of the land on the Marshall's Airport site is safeguarded for future development in the local plan. So it's something that we need to be mindful of as a potential change in the future. In terms of the western side of the study area, we include the station, because clearly, as well as getting access to the city centre, access to the station is likely to be significant for many people. And I'd say the study area is not a hard and fast area, so there may be options we look at that go slightly beyond it, but the primary focus has really been about dealing with access from the east, and that primarily means the challenges along the Newmarket Road itself and how we can seek to resolve those in the future. So go on to the next slide, please. So just to summarise for those who either weren't involved or, so just in, there's a question come through. The station I'm referring to is the central station, yes. Clearly Cambridge South is not there at the moment. Cambridge North is significant, but we are, as we'll come back to, seeking to avoid going through the meadows to access Cambridge North directly. In terms of the pre-consultation engagement, we undertook 2 workshops with a range of stakeholders on the 1st and 2nd of July. We then had a public engagement period from the 6th of July to the 3rd of August. Like this, it was an online event because of COVID-19, and we had a total of 112 surveys submitted, but a further 299 pins and comments on the online map. As well as that, there's been a range of engagement with other stakeholder organisations who've got a specific interest in the scheme, and that's gone on as needed through the course of the study. So next slide, please. And we have prepared a more detailed report summarising all the issues that came out of that engagement process, but just to maybe highlight a few of the pertinent points. First was concern about potential impact on Ditton Meadows and the need to seek to avoid a significant impact on that sensitive area, and that's well understood. Mill Road, and particularly the Mill Road Bridge, I would have to say there was a range of responses, both support for and opposition to the closure, and that's something that is perhaps. Could you maybe, if for questions, would it be possible to hold them for the question section? It's just they're popping up on the screen, and I may not catch them at the time. So if you hold your questions, put your hand up, and then you'll be the first in the queue to ask them when you get to the end. So as I say, we're not here primarily to talk about Mill Road, but it's worth noting that raised both positive and negative views. Range of concerns, not just about congestion on Newmarket Road and at the junction with Elizabeth Way, but also the quality of the local environment, the lack of general placemaking, and the need to improve it more generally, but very specifically the need for things like segregated cycleways and measures to improve both real and perceived safety along that corridor. In terms of public transport, general concern that it should be more frequent, more reliable, but also more direct to the destinations people want to go to. And obviously in Cambridge, often concerns about getting to places like Adam Brooks and the Science Park, not just about the city centre or indeed the station. So next slide, please. So just a couple other topics came out of the engagement. One was the suggestion that actually a lot of the Newmarket Road problems relate to the retail sites that are further into the city. Could they be moved out somewhere further out to Airport Way? It's an interesting opportunity. Obviously, there is a converse argument that if you do that, you'll have people going out of the city centre to get to those retail sites. So I think it has strengths and weaknesses, but certainly it's a valid comment to be considering about. In terms of rail, questions have been raised around the potential for new stations in the study area, but also the suggestion about potentially realigning the railway line, which potentially would take it north of the land, north of Cherry Hinton through the airport site, but also, as people will be aware, about increasing services. So in line with the plans for an eventual east-west rail extension to the east towards Ipswich, which would involve some degree of dual tracking of sections of the line. So there are a number of suggestions that come through there. And as always, a reminder that for some people, there is still a need or desire to use a car, and to make sure that there is a degree of access managed in a way clearly that doesn't damage everybody else's interests. So that's just a very quick canter through some of the main issues arising. I say there are others, and a more detailed report will be submitted to the Joint Assembly and the Executive Board. Have the next slide, please. So this slide is a very quick heads up as to the sorts of options we're looking at. And we certainly at this point in time very much welcome thoughts and responses along them. I think if I can summarise, our view is the Newmarket Road itself is in places, and particularly from McDonald's to the Leper Chapel, it is quite constrained. There's a limited amount you could do without having to acquire a lot of private land. And that means sort of wide scale improvements in terms of bus lanes or cycle lanes, particularly in that area, are limited. What we are looking at for Newmarket Road as a set of shorter term improvements is to make use of traffic management tools to manage car access to ensure that public transport can operate effectively, and to reallocate road space to ensure that cycle facilities are better than they are now. So those measures will help to deal with some of the existing problems. They won't necessarily be the whole answer for the long term for Newmarket Road. The other potential option in Newmarket Road to consider, again, as people will be aware, that the park and ride site is reasonably space limited, and to consider whether there is benefits in having a larger park and ride site further out towards the A14, that both creates the opportunity for us to provide more parking spaces, but also potentially to intercept people as they're coming in on the A14, perhaps not even going on the Newmarket Road. So it gives a little bit more flexibility. So that's in terms of the first sort of potential phase of works, which is dealing with existing projects. If I can just repeat, as I think Peter said at the beginning, in terms of questions, please put your hand up and then we'll come round to your questions. We won't necessarily be using the chat function for picking questions up. So if you keep them to the end and put your blue hand up, yes, that'd be ideal. And we'll pick them all up at the end. So looking to the longer term, and that particularly reflects the potential for wider growth in the Cambridge area, and specifically the options that the safeguarded land may be developed in the future on the Marshall's site. We would see a potential linkage from the Newmarket Road with public transport route taking you down towards the city. And there are a few different options in that regard. Many of you will be aware of the proposals for the Cambridge Autonomous Metro, which would propose a tunnel from what's dubbed Cambridge East in this sort of vicinity into the city centre. And any infrastructure we provided down here would be compatible with that, would enable vehicles to head straight into the city. Clearly, that is an option which avoids any challenges of getting traffic through the congested streets to the east of the city. We would see there being effectively two strategic options, both with strengths and weaknesses. One would be to go up onto Coldham's Lane and either proceed back to the Newmarket Road or south and in on Mill Road. And the other would be potentially over the Tins and in on Mill Road. And in introducing these options, I'd say we are aware that both are challenging in terms of their impacts, but there are limited options to be looked at as an alternative to the tunnelled option. So those would be the sort of local public transport solutions. There is then the Cambridge to Newmarket rail line. Many of you will be familiar with. For anyone who isn't, it doesn't actually currently have a station in the vicinity. It's got a very tight bend where it goes round through Coldham's Common, and it's a single track line, which means at the moment the capacity of the track is very limited. It's also worth saying that the capacity at Cambridge Station is also extremely limited as well. So getting traffic down into the station, you've got very limited opportunities. That said, there are clearly benefits in having a heavy rail station, and East West Rail Consortium, which is the consortium of local authorities promoting the use of East West Rail, has commissioned a piece of work to look at what those options might be and whether there is a business case for further investment. So we would see that as a longer term solution. It's something more likely to be delivered by East West Rail and or Network Rail, but it may be part of the big picture as to the solution for this area. So it's not necessarily part of our core study, but very much part of the wider thinking in terms of joining up what the different players in the area might be considering doing. One other option that's maybe worth just flagging, because we've been giving it consideration, is there is concern about traffic coming down from junction 34 through Fen Ditton and through Barnwell onto the Newmarket Road. And so we looked at the options as to whether or not to close or restrict the slip roads on the A14. Again, really important to reiterate, none of these are commitments. These are ideas that we are putting initially to members at the Joint Assembly and Exec Board. Very keen to get comments from yourselves tonight, but also, subject to Exec Board approval, then taking out to proper public consultation and wider discussion with all the stakeholders later in the year. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So the next steps, the Joint Assembly of Greater Cambridge Partnership is on the 10th of September. And if you have public questions, they need to be submitted by 10 AM on the 7th of September to the email address that's there that you'll find on the GCP website. I think what's important to say is these are if you've got a sort of formal public question you want to raise. If you've got a more general question about the scheme, I hope we'll be able to answer those today. But if there's anything that you haven't managed to get a satisfactory answer from today, please do feel free to contact us directly. And you've got our contact details also on the slide, also available on the GCP website. So if you've got a very specific question, please do feel free just to come to us. If it goes to joint assembly, then you won't necessarily be getting the technical response to it. There is an executive board meeting on the 1st of October that will consider the reports we've submitted to the joint assembly and the thoughts of the joint assembly, and indeed any further thoughts coming out of this evening's session. And subject to their approval, that will then lead into a public consultation exercise in the autumn. Quite what form that takes, your guess is as good as mine. I think it will have a significant digital element. We would like to think that we'll start at some point be able to restore face-to-face meetings, but it may well be fully online, and so that will emerge in due course. And yeah, the contact details and telephone number at the bottom. So I think at that point, thank you for the time, and hopefully Peter will handle any questions and refer them on to me, and I'll still make sure that anyone who will answer question is admitted. I think we've got 3 participants with their hands raised.
Yeah, okay, so could we start with Claire Daunton, please?
Thank you. So 2 questions, one relating to the tightness of the map that we've just seen. It doesn't take account of people coming into Cambridge from much further out. You're really concentrating on the area from the A14 within the city, from the A14 going into the city. So how are you going to manage the traffic coming in from further east? And in connection with that, you talked about moving the park and ride, the Newmarket Road park and ride. Are there any thoughts about moving that park and ride much further out along the A1303?
Okay, so in terms of traffic coming from the east, we will be looking at people coming in from further east. The A14 clearly is a trunk road, and it's not really in our remit to look at changes to that. And similarly, the whole railway line is an important issue, but again, that sits primarily with Network Rail. So what we're looking at is what we would consider to be a realistic scheme that we can seek to deliver about access to Greater Cambridge in the foreseeable. But the issues of traffic coming in from further afield will absolutely be part of our consideration. What we're not looking at is looking at major new long distance strategic corridors, because those sit with the national entities like the Highways England. In terms of the park and ride, we would see that there is benefit in having a park and ride on the Newmarket Road. You'll be aware that GCP is looking at a number of potential park and ride sites, and so there is an option to add in additional park and ride elsewhere. But in terms of what we're looking at this study, I think our thinking is primarily to improve the park and ride offer on the Newmarket Road itself. Okay. Are you thinking of something east of the Choir Interchange?
Yes, definitely, yes.
At the moment, I think our view is that we'd want it on this side, because one of the other issues, we need to make sure it's attractive for the bus operators, and relatively accessible to the urban area. The further we take it out, the risk is that it becomes significantly further away from the destinations people are serving. It's less attractive to operate by bus, things like that. So we do want to make sure that it's relatively close in.
Okay, might I just follow up on that then? You're moving it further out, but not much further out. And of course, the access to it, that road that comes off the Choir roundabout, the top end of Newmarket Road, goes down to 1 lane. And it's a significant bottleneck at busy times. So what would be the advantage of moving the park and ride just slightly further out without changing the road layout there? Or maybe that's what you're intending to do if you're moving the park and ride.
Sorry, if you could just explain the question again?
Yeah, so on the diagram, you showed moving the park and ride further out along Newmarket Road, or further out towards the Choir roundabout. But will you then be improving the access from the Choir roundabout? Because Newmarket Road, as it comes off the Choir roundabout, runs down to a single lane, and it is a significant bottleneck.
Yeah, absolutely. We would be looking to make sure that it's as easy as possible to get to the park and ride, and then potentially we wouldn't be looking at sort of highway improvements downstream of that, because clearly we don't want to encourage driving the centre. But yes, we'd be making sure that, and I think it's fair to say Highways England will be very concerned that anything we do doesn't create blocking back towards the A14. So yes, if we needed to make improvements to the highway to make sure you could get to the park and ride effectively, then that'd be something we'd pick up at that stage.
Okay, thank you. Might I just ask one other question about the proposal concerning the closure of junction 34, I think it is. On the face of it, sounds like a very good idea, but then there would be dispersal of traffic to the other junctions. And that again would put additional pressure on Quay roundabout.
Yeah. And I think it's important to stress at this stage, it's not a proposal, it's an idea. And again, we'd be talking with Highways England and others about that and trying to make sure that whatever we do, again, Highways England clearly wouldn't sign up to anything that they felt created knock-on problems elsewhere. So no, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Claire. Okay, could we go to Councillor Bradnam now, please?
Thank you, gentlemen. So I'm also concerned about junction 34, and I'm concerned because this is the first time I've heard about possible, quote you, close or restrict the slip roads on the A14. And I'm just concerned about the impacts of that on the residents in Horningsea, not so much Fenditton, but there's quite a lot of movement between Milton and Horningsea using those slip roads. So these are local villages that interconnect, and they use each other's facilities. Horningsea, some people in Horningsea refer to Milton to use some services, and I'm just concerned about the impact on those communities for the, you know, trips to the supermarket, for example, that they might choose to do. I'm just wondering, will you do consultation on that before you undertake anything major?
Just to be absolutely clear, at the moment, these are just ideas that we're putting out for initial review, with a view that if the executive board is happy with the ideas we're pulling together, they would all go to public consultation. So nothing is going to happen at all prior to, I would suspect, at least 2 rounds of public consultation. This is very much just a first event to set some of the ideas out, and it's incredibly helpful to get reviews from people like yourself about some of the concerns regarding those issues. And we will then get a view from the Joint Assembly and Executive Board about going forward to consultation. They may have views as to whether particular elements they do or don't like, and then anything would go to public consultation, and that would be before preparing effectively what's called a strategic outline business case, which is still quite a high level document. So there's still quite a long way to go.
That's good. I'm reassured. Thank you. I'm reassured by that, because I'm very mindful that once something's on paper, it tends to plough on ahead regardless of what people's views are. So the other thing, but I am taking on board that you're doing public consultation, which is great. But the other question I just wanted to ask, it was a bit hard to tell from the map, but I'm just very conscious that as you go further east along the Newmarket Road and you approach the Quay roundabout, there's several things there. One is that there's a stream along there, and also there is an increasing difference in height between the A1303 road surface and the surrounding land, and it becomes increasingly steep between the road and the land to the south. And I'm just wondering, you're not planning to go that far along, are you?
No, and I mean, James Littlewood, who I think may well be on the call, has already made clear to us his concerns about the environmental sensitivity of the land towards the eastern end of that section. So not least because it's lower lying and wetter, it's not the most attractive place to be building something anyway. So, you know, those points have been very helpfully made already, that are noted.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Anna. Could we now go to Ian Manning, please?
Hi all. So just 4 quick questions. the comment about Newmarket Road, have you done the analysis of the width of Newmarket Road all the way down? Because I really do think there is plenty of room there for segregated pedestrians and cycleways, as long as we're going to be ambitious and sort of bold around reallocation of road space. And that's going beyond just saying let's have a narrow road either way. It's possibly think about even one-way sections so we can actually have more pedestrian and cycle traffic going through. So the main question is whether you've done the analysis of the widths yet. That's the first question. Second one, I know you made the point about the area and not having enough Cambridge North in effect, and I understand the position you're in with growth in Cambridge, because you know everything's changing at such a rate that you've got to stop your analysis at some point. But given that Cambridge North exists and the Chisholm Trail is happening, and that will link Cambridge North into your area, I think it would be criminal if your area didn't envelop Cambridge North, because the whole point of the Chisholm Trails is to take people from Cambridge North into the very area you're talking about.
Can we take two questions and I'll do the other two? If I can pick up the first two that you've asked, the one about the widths of Newmarket Road, as things stand, we need to be quite careful that if we do something as radical as you suggest, which would be about taking it down from a standard 7.3 metre road to perhaps 3.75 metres, just a single lane, that would have huge knock-on effects to roads like Coldham's Lane, like the Milton Road. It's not to say that there is not merit in doing that, but I think that would need to be part of a city-wide strategy. It's not something that's sensible to do just on Newmarket Road in isolation. You really need to do it as part of a wider package. City Access, you'll be aware of, is looking at things around, for example, demand management. So I wouldn't reject that, but in terms of something we can do in isolation of one corridor, it's going to cause a lot of issues for other routes. And I'm aware Coldham's Lane residents have got their concerns of their own about increase in traffic on Coldham's Lane at the moment. So that's one that we do need to treat with a bit of caution. In terms of access to Cambridge North, we would anticipate seeking to provide walking and cycling facilities along the Newmarket Road. They would interchange with the Chisholm Trail. What we have looked at but rejected on environmental grounds is the idea, for example, of a new public transport route that could cross across the Cam and the Meadows to northeast Cambridge. There would be strategically some great advantages in being able to do that, but we are very aware of the environmental negatives associated with that. And I think a number of people have made it very clear to us that that's probably a red line which we really don't want to cross. So there would be non-motorised access to Cambridge North, but we're not looking to create a new sort of large-scale infrastructure. If in due course the CAM network is introduced, that would then provide long-term public transport access through the station up and the city centre to the science park, but that's a longer-term plan. And again, that's being delivered by the combined authority rather than as part of this scheme.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't suggesting you go across the green space. That idea was killed. That idea was killed in the 90s. I think the point I'm making is about sort of public perception. If you look at a plan, and the plan doesn't have a little line that goes around Cambridge North, you're going to get a reaction that's, have they not thought of that? I think it's a presentational thing.
I mean, to be honest, we actually had a version of the plan that showed it, and then we decided people would think that we were therefore going to plough out the meadows, so we decided to take it out again. But yeah, point is well made, and we'll make it clear.
As long as you draw the line so that it does not envelop the what's known as five trees, which is the historical route of that bus you're talking about, you'll be fine. And on the point about, obviously I take your point about not being made in isolation, but we are now finally using experimental orders. So I'd encourage you to start thinking about that in terms of the radical things, because it would allow you to. Okay, two other questions. The modelling you've done for this, can you just briefly talk about what that is, what software you're using? Is it Paramex? And if so, have you bought additional modules that let you do model pedestrian and cycle movements? Or if it's not Paramex, is it something else? How is that, just briefly, how that's done? And then the final one, can you just talk about what the democratic oversight so far to this point has been? Because obviously one of the criticism of the city deal, as it was then, or still is named, originally, was that things were very officer-led. And I'd just like to understand, I think it's great you're doing this meeting, but because there's no political lead on this meeting, I'm just interested in how we got to this meeting. Was there a decision of the Assembly to have a public consultation meeting, and that's the next step?
So in terms of the software we're using is Paramix. I would suggest if you want a technical discussion on that, we do take that one offline because there may be some attendees who are less infused, but we'd be very happy to engage on that as a separate discussion. In terms of the oversight, so the principle to proceed with the study will have gone through, again, reviewed by the Assembly and the Executive Board, and the next stage, having done this initial piece of work, is to report back to the Joint Assembly and again onto the Executive Board. So that's where the democratic oversight comes from for this. And in terms of anybody else, any other participants, as I said earlier, both those meetings provide an opportunity for members of the public to lodge questions. As I say, I wouldn't ask the Joint Assembly about what software we're using on the model, but if you have concerns about the democratic accountability of the scheme, that is very much a question that you may feel you want to submit to the Joint Assembly for further.
Cool. That's very good.
Comment.
So thank you. That answers my question. I'll follow up with you afterwards about the Paramix stuff. So.
Great. Thank you, Ian. Can we now move on to Matthew Bullock, please?
I have two areas of question. One is, are you taking into account the idea that the Cambridge East development will be a very large development? I think I'm chairman of the Cambridge Ahead Regional Planning Group, and one of the things we've put in our submission to the evidence on the local plan is we're envisaging that employment site of up to 40,000 people, so kind of about the same size as the biomedical campus will generate into. So it itself will be a destination site, and hence traffic will go to it as well as kind of going into the rest of the city. So it's a very major site you're dealing with in terms of the 5 densified sites in the city. Second question is going back to the question raised by Claire Daunton about the traffic flowing in from the east. One of the things which is clearly a very important public corridor is the railway line, the east-west rail, and this extension out through Fulbourn. And have you thought about the idea that in fact a new park and ride could be generated at 6 Mile Bottom, so that taking this question of the eastern traffic, which one can see very clearly is growing substantially, could be taken off both at Quay and through that railway line into the east of Cambridge, and at the same time thought about the issue, which is a highways agency issue, and I know both of these are not in your remit, that Cambridge is unique in having a motorway that runs round it, but all 3 junctions are one way, and that if in fact you want to deal with the issue of traffic in the east, one of the things that you should be talking to the highways agency about is making the eastern junction a multi-way junction, just as we should at Great Chesterford Junction and the Girton Junction.
Okay, so in terms of the developments to the east of Cambridge, as you'll be aware, we're currently amidst the process of the development of the new Greater Cambridge local plan. As always, we're always in a cycle of plan development. So we are in a position where we need to look at the development that is currently in place and committed and how we deal with those challenges. And we need to be thinking about what the strategies might be for dealing with future development. And, you know, as I said in my answers to other people, this study will run for some time. This is not something where in 3 months' time, we will know what the answers are. This will take some years to get to a final strategy, by which time we hope that the draft local plan will inform it. And once there is clarity as to what is or is not committed in the local plan, then absolutely we will be taking that on board. We're already looking at some of the speculative ideas, and you'll be aware that 6 Mile Bottom has on a number of occasions been proposed as a development site as well. So, you know, there are a number of potential opportunities in there. Yes, we've looked at the potential for park and ride on 6 Mile Bottom. The challenge we've got on the rail system at the moment, as I say, is very, very limited capacity without at least the upgrade of the line, and some real challenges at Cambridge Station in terms of how you actually get trains into the station. So the answer is yes, though the options you're talking about are very much part of our long list. And if you're wanting to have a look, there is full documentation on the Joint Assembly papers, and you'll see those various options that have sort of appeared there. But as I say, at this point in time, we need to both have a strategy for how we deal with current development, as well as looking at what we're calling phase 2, which is a longer term strategy that deals with the points that you've made.
I think DFT have in fact talked about commissioning a study to dual the track on that line by 2040, haven't they?
So at the moment, the East West Rail Consortium has commissioned an initial piece of research, and I think the intention is to use that to set the case out to encourage DFT to look at that. I mean, you'll be aware the long-term plan's always been that would then become part of East West Rail. East West Rail has a significant task on its hand dealing with the Bedford to Cambridge section, and so yes, I would imagine once there's a confirmed route under construction for that, then DFT's mind will move towards points east of Cambridge. Again, it's one of those things that it can be frustratingly slow and it will take some time, but we are talking both with Highways England and Network Rail as part of this study to try and make sure that we're sort of joining up the different opportunities. And I say it is important to distinguish between some of those things which may well be the very long-term solution and some of the things that we actually need to try and do now to deal with the real problems people are facing sort of today, tomorrow, next year.
Okay. I just want to make sure you were aware of the kind of the potential of that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
There is a lot of growth going towards the east of the present time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is an important reason for this study existing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Could I just remind people that if they wish to ask a question, could they raise their hand? It might be easier than resorting to the chat room. That would be great. Thank you. Right, moving on. Can we go to Francis Amrani, please?
You're on mute.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yes, yeah, fine.
Okay. I basically have two questions which kind of relate to the map that you've shown. The first one is the park and ride and the positioning of the park and ride in relation to the Cambridge United Stadium, which I think is proposed in Quai Waters, which is between the park and ride proposed position and Quai Roundabout on the south side. So I'm just wondering why that isn't on the map, and would it be worth considering whether they could actually be combined? And the second question relates to the railway line. I can see that you've got both Cambridge stations on there, but there doesn't seem to be any suggestion of a station in Cherry Hinton or Fulbourn, both of which have been talked about for many years and were in fact discussed at South Cambs District Council when the land in Fulbourn was put up as a development site. And both of those would actually alleviate quite a lot of traffic if one of those were to be put in place. That may well be something for Network Rail, but they're not on your map. So those are my two questions: stations and the stadium.
Okay, so in terms of park and ride, as things move forward, there is any sort of clarity for us to work with what Cambridge United might or might not be doing, we would be happy to engage with that at the right time. So you're absolutely right. There are potentially opportunities if there is a suitable car park provided to see how things might interface, but I think we're not at that stage yet. In terms of the railway stations, my understanding is Cherry Hinton has been looked at previously, and there was very, very strong local opposition from the community to the idea of reopening that station. You'll be aware it's quite a constricted location, and in terms of any sort of drop-off or interchange, I think there was a feeling that people would end up sort of just bumping up on the curb outside people's houses, for example. And so I think there was very strong opposition to that location. Fulbourn is potentially another opportunity for another station. Being further out, it might help intercept some longer term traffic, but it doesn't necessarily deal with the people in the growth areas of East Cambridge as it stands. So I think if the line is improved, then the idea of a possible Fulbourn station may still be a valid one as well. The only comment I'd make then is the question which would need to be considered further as to how many stations you want along there. And I think our view is that probably the optimum location would be something a little bit to the west of Cherry Hinton, where there's a bit more space to provide it. That would provide access to the East Cambridge development site, and also potentially interchange with the CAM network as well. So that would be, potentially an ideal location for a station, but that certainly wouldn't preclude Fulbourn. I think Cherry Hinton, I think, would be a very difficult one to take forward. And as I understand, there was very strong local opposition to it at the time.
Can I come back? And just to say that there have been 4 sites that have been suggested, to my knowledge, in the past. One is at the level crossing on the High Street in Cherry Hinton, where there has been opposition because there's no parking. The second one is at Tesco's on Yarrow Road, where I think there's probably quite a bit more space for potential. The other one is near the level crossing on Tevisham Road, and the other one I think is further out on Station Road. So I think there are 4 sites that have actually been talked about, and I admit that Cherry Hinton High Street is probably not viable, but the other 3 I think would be worth looking at.
Yeah, no, very happy to have a further look at those. My colleague Ben Green, who's on the call, will, I'm sure, be happy to go and have a quick peek at some of those.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Francis. Could we move on to John Trapp now, please?
Hello.
Hi.
Now?
You're on. Yes, you're here now.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So more of observations rather than questions. First of all, I'd like to support Claire Daunton about the positioning of the park and ride. The real problem is actually Quay Roundabout. Access onto Quay Roundabout from the east is pitiful at rush hours. I mean, when I was lecturing at 9 o'clock, I would get there about 7:05 to make sure I have an easy ride. Otherwise, it was half an hour or 3/4 of an hour there. So that really ought to be considered. And if one had dedicated bus lanes from the park and ride, one would probably cut down a lot of traffic there. So one's got to do it actually east of that junction. The other one I'd like to support is the Dullingham. At Dullingham station, sometimes the train doesn't stop because it's packed already. Going west towards Cambridge, it's got so many passengers, it sometimes doesn't stop at all at Dullingham. And the other point is that if you're going to improve the cycle track, if improving the rail track from, say, Dullingham or Newmarket, during it, might it be also opportune to put a cycleway there as well, to actually include something for cycling path, because that would be nice and level, very good for transport, particularly if the development at 6 Mile Bottom started coming.
I mean, just as an aside on the cycling, the other comments are helpful, and we will note those and give further consideration. On the cycling point, you're probably aware that there's a proposal for the Fulbourn Greenway that would provide a dedicated route coming in from Fulbourn for cycling and other non-motorised users, which does in place follow the railway line, not entirely. The actual challenge we've got is that if you dual the railway line, it then becomes harder to fit the non-motorised user route in, because you're taking some of the spare line land that exists at the moment up. But that from Fulbourn at least is already in hand.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could we move on to Elliot Page, please?
Hi, you should be able to hear me now.
Yeah,
yes,
thank you.
I had a couple of points. First one, I think Matthew has largely raised about the all movement junctions at 6 Mile Bottom, and having that same conversation in terms of talking about, the closure of the slips at the same time with Highways England. But the second one is more one about the sort of study area and the plan, and whether it includes Davy Road, and whether the opportunities that Davy Road provides to give access to the railway station, and possibly even an eastern access to the railway station on that side of the city. And as part of that, dealing with the Radigan Road, Pern Road, I think it is, roundabout, and past College School.
I think in terms of changes to the Highways England network, there are some useful points raised. I'm not sure if Stephen Greenhill from Highways England's on the call, but I'm sure if he is, he'll be noting them. But I think he'll be aware of some of the points that have been raised about a number of interchanges you know, I would have to say major changes to motorway interchanges are substantial pieces of work. So again, there's something Highways England will look at. They come up with a sort of series of 5-year investment strategies, and doubtless they will give consideration to what future opportunities might be there. They're not things that are going to be dealt with necessarily in the next couple of years. And in terms of access into the station, we've been looking at a range of different options, to be honest. We don't see anything that I'd say is an ideal one. But again, you know, thanks to the suggestions, that's really the purpose of events like this, is to see if there are any other ideas. I think so far that's not one that we've felt has been the optimum idea, but I'm very welcome to express other views, and we will certainly give thought to anything else that's been raised today.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Could we now move on to Elsie Sparrow, please?
Hello, hi.
Hi.
So I'm planning to move to Newmarket Road, so just a resident. I've got a couple of questions. The first question, they're mainly generic ones, and I just wanted to say I also support the access to the station, to the main station from Davy Road, you know, just to kind of have a less crowded access to the main station where the main access is. So like from the other side of the tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first question is, have you thought of any, to have something like, you know, bridges, either tunnels, let's say, for example, where the McDonald's roundabout on Newmarket Road, you know, we're really struggling for space in Cambridge, and just to have something, you know, just some not small changes, something more, you know, drastic, which will help with the, I don't know, flow of the traffic. So either something going above, let's say, as you go from Codham's Lane towards McDonald's, kind of, you know, going straight above towards, you know, whatever you need to get, or maybe, you know, so you kind of to try to ease off that roundabout. That's my first question. Or even not just there, you know, have the solutions in different places of the road. And the second question, just sort of following up on that, have you done any collaboration or reached out to any other countries, you know, I don't know, Japan, or just all people who are, you know, if they've got high population countries, just to reach out for their ideas, you know, see what they're doing. Like, you know, in China, they've got those double-decker buses which kind of go across, and then the cars going under them. So, you know, buses don't stop, you know, they can just go anywhere. So yeah, these are my two questions I have. Thank you.
Okay. So I think they're linked to some degree. So in terms of things like an elevated section of Newmarket Road, no. In environmental terms, we will not be putting an elevated highway down the Newmarket Road past people's bedroom windows. It's simply not an option that would ever achieve planning consent. It's not possible to deliver. I mean, there's a whole lot of financial reasons why not to do it. The aim for GCP's program is to be looking to promote the use of effectively alternatives to the private car. So creating significant highway capacity is not really what we're trying to achieve anyway. In terms of tunnelling, we could consider it, but again, you'd have some significant problems. Obviously, the Newmarket Road goes over the Cam, so you'd have to have quite a deep tunnel to take you underneath the Cam. Again, you're talking about a very, very costly solution, which would probably, again, mean just demolishing quite a lot of properties in the East Barnwell area, because to actually create the access to a tunnel would be quite challenging. So again, it creates lots of really difficult environmental issues to deal with. So I think those options really aren't where we're trying to go. What we're trying to do really is find measures that effectively manage the use of the private car and help promote alternatives, and, you know, avoid creating too much more road space. And in terms of lessons learned from other countries, I mean, I've personally worked in quite a few and spent a lot of time working on European research on collaborative demonstration projects. So yeah, absolutely very interested in some of the solutions that are out there. And there are things going on at the moment looking at things like autonomous vehicles and other solutions. Some of those things are successful, some of them aren't, but yeah, absolutely very much open to what opportunities are out there in the future. I would have to say the Chinese example of the double-decker buses looked great, but if you do a bit more digging on it, I think there's some doubts on the internet as whether it actually really existed or not. I think that was possibly too good to be true. But we certainly are looking at some of the other demonstrations that are out there of new technologies.
Well, just to add on to that, thank you. What about cable cars, or even like in terms of buses, have really short shuttles instead of having big buses? Have this been considered at all?
Yep. So the combined authority for the Cambridgeshire Autonomous Metro is looking at all different options, including autonomous shorter pods as the potential long-term solution. And I think GCP will be supportive of that. Those are a longer term solution in terms of what we're trying to do on the Newmarket Road. Really, in the next couple of years, we need to sort of focus on dealing with those problems. But as I said, the public transport corridor connecting Newmarket Road down through the Marshall site towards Coldham's Lane, that would potentially form part of the autonomous metro. And yes, I think some of those options are definitely under consideration.
Thank you.
A cable car is a slightly different challenge. Yeah, I think yeah. Okay.
Great. Right, could we move on to Matthew Danish, please?
Hello.
Hi, Matt.
Oh, there. Okay, that worked. Great. Thanks a lot. I just wanted to mention that you talked about the Fulbourn Greenway, and that's great. However, 6 Mile Bottom and the Wilbrahams actually have had a long-standing problem where they can't get a safe cycle route. There really is absolutely nothing crossing the A11. So if you are extending that far out, please do keep in mind the need for a safe cycle route out that far.
Yep.
I was going to ask, what considerations have you been making for Coldham's Lane and, for example, safe cycling and walking there as well? Thanks.
So in terms of 6 Mile Bottom, as referred to earlier, there's been discussion in previous rounds of local plan development, of potential development there. If that were in due course to come forward, then I'm sure that part of that would need to address some of the issues that you're raising in terms of cycle access. So I'd say that's an issue that will definitely stay live, and I'm sure will be revisited. Coldham's Lane, you'll be aware, has been looked at recently by CPCA, and again, I'm sure there will be further discussion on that and how to pick some of those issues up. As I say, we haven't initially looked at that because it's been looked at elsewhere. We may need to come back and have another look at that again in the future.
Great. Does that answer your questions, Matthew?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Matthew. Right. We've got 2 more people, and we've got 4 minutes. So if we can move on to John Williams, please.
Are you on mute, John?
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, all loud and clear.
Okay, right. It's great going east-west, and that's probably your brief on the eastern corridor. But north-south is also important. And one of the issues that we have in Fulbourn is traffic going to the Biomed campus. So what are you proposing to do to help with that, particularly from your new park and ride site, so that people can get down to the Biomed campus pretty easily by public transport or cycle? And my other comment is, if you're looking at a cycleway along the railway out to 6 Mile Bottom, that would be great, because it would also link in Great Wilbraham and Little Wilbraham. And if you could get it to Fulbourn, and then they can pick up the Greenway at Fulbourn. But it is a big issue that the Wilbrahams, I haven't got a safe cycle route to connect to either the Greenway or the National Cycle Route Network.
Okay, I think we picked up the Wilbrahams issue already. In terms of access to the CBC, yes, we're aware everyone needs access to it. We will certainly look at alternatives around improved bus services. As things stand, as I say, the aim would be that the public transport services from the new Park and Ride would run down through the development site into the station and then down as part of the CAM network to the CBC. So that would provide the sort of connectivity that you're looking for in due course. So we're certainly not looking at an alternative piece of heavy infrastructure to do that, because the aim is that the CAM network would provide that. But that should then create a linkage from the Newmarket Road Park and Ride straight down to CBC. Obviously, by providing connectivity to the railway station, there's the opportunity then to pick up the existing guided busway as well. So that would be the other option, rather than creating any
it's just
heavier
that
infrastructure
people,
going directly down.
yeah, it's just that people like to take the most direct route, and at the moment the most direct route is to stay in their car and park at the Biomed campus.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That's the last of the, oh, we've got one last question from Paula Downs. If we can make this the last one, that would be great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paula. We'll just unmute you. There we go.
Thank you.
Oh, we got a hold of, lovely.
Thank you. So you just said that for Coldham's Lane, the CPCA has looked at it for safer walking and cycling. Could you give me a contact there so that I can speak to someone? I'm the chair of the Coldham's Lane Residents Association.
Yeah, I think you contacted us earlier today, possibly, and we were going to try and fix a call with you next week. So very happy to catch up on that, and hopefully we can pick that issue up and point you in the right direction.
Oh, that
so, yeah, we can definitely do that.
That sounds great. That wasn't me, so I'm not sure who that is. But
all right. Yeah, if you email the contact number for this, the contact address for this, we can provide details offline.
That's great. Thanks ever so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, you've just come up. If you would like to join us.
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Joe, just to be absolutely clear, any links between communities must be NMUs to include equestrians. We are not just looking at cycle and pedestrian paths, as has been mentioned throughout this presentation. We cannot be excluded from yet another greenway.
Well, we'll look at each route in turn, depending on. I mean, we've had this discussion offline, Linda. We'll doubtless carry it on. So where there is equestrian activity, we'll be looking to make sure we tie into it. Where there are bridleways already there, certainly. A lot of the study area we're looking at the moment is primarily urban. But absolutely, going out to a place like 6 Mile Bottom, I understand, is very different. So,
I'm talking about communities like the Wilbrams and beyond.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's understood. As you get that far out, it's a very different story to the Newmarket Road, where I see as primarily being cycles rather than horses.
I don't think we do want to ride down Newmarket Road, actually, at this point in time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good.
Great, thank you. Well, if there are no more questions, if people in the meantime do want to question us or talk to us, then please use the contact us email address, and we'll be happy to engage with you. Thank you, Joe, for his presentations, and thank you to everyone that's participated today. We will also look at some of the chat comments as well, and maybe hope to get back to you there as well. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.